Okay, somewhere around 2013, an enormous amount of brands in Europe and the United States all signed pledges not to use Uzbekistani cotton due to forced labor being used in harvesting cotton. And since then, I think most of the brands and people like me in the United States and Europe have gone to sleep on what's going on in Uzbekistan. And what happened in 2013 seems to be in the midst of our minds as something which is going to last forever and nothing will change. But recently, I was awoken because I got a request from one of our guests who owns a vertical denim mill from cotton farming out. This guest, BCT Denim, asked if they could exhibit at Kingpin show. And in trying to understand our position on this mill, I realized that there's an enormous amount that has changed since 2013. Everyone in our industry needs to know what's going on because it's kind of dramatic and really important in the context of what's going on in China and other situations. So here we are. We have put together, I think, a pretty formidable panel. And I'd like to kick this off with everyone. If you don't mind, everyone, please introduce themselves. Patricia, as the lady, it would be great if you could start off.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. I'm the CEO and founder of Responsible Sourcing Network and have been looking at the situation in Uzbekistan since 2007.
Jonas, why don't you go second?
Thank you, Andrew. My name is Jonas Astrup. I work for the International Labour Organization, and I've spent the last 5 years living and working on the ground here in Uzbekistan, where I lead the ILO third-party monitoring projects. And before joining the United Nations, I worked in the private sector as a global manager for responsible sourcing for a multinational company, and I've also led various sort of global sourcing, responsible sourcing initiatives in textile, garments, and toys in various places in the world. But now my focus is 100% on Uzbekistan. Thank you.
Thank you. Muzaffar.
Thanks, Andrew. My name is Muzaffar Rakhmatov. I'm a project coordinator at BCT Denim Division. So my responsibility is to look after the whole process, to build a strategy, and then to speak to the key investors on the outlook. So I'm kind of a person who connects the dots in this mill.
In my research, I had the really good fortune to meet Dan. I never expected to meet an American from Memphis in Uzbekistan. So Dan, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Andrew. And thank you for all the other esteemed panelists that we have the chance to work with here. My name is Dan Patterson. I have a company called Silverleaf. I live in Memphis, Tennessee. I was born and raised in the Mississippi Delta, and we have our farming operations in the United States and Mississippi. In 2018, we came to Uzbekistan to help modernize and mechanize agriculture, particularly cotton, in Uzbekistan. And since then, we have been working in the Jizak region in the Paktikor district on our farm to grow cotton and then begin the vertical integration process that we'll talk a little bit more about today. So I appreciate the opportunity, Andrew. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, first question, Patricia, what is the current situation in Uzbekistan with regard to forced labor? Does it exist? And where do we stand?
Sure. And I also forgot to say in my introduction that I'm the co-founder of the Cotton Campaign, which has been monitoring the situation in Uzbekistan for the last 10 or so years. But the situation in Uzbekistan just historically goes back to Soviet times, when there's always been a lot of organization of children, particularly to go and work in various fields. In Uzbekistan's case, it's cotton. So this has been a situation of forced child labor that's been going on for over 80 or so years. Starting in 2013, as you were pointing out, Andrew, things started to change. The government actually stopped orchestrating the movement of children from their schools to the fields. And more or less, children are no longer being used to harvest cotton. Once the kind of the call out and unhappiness with seeing all these images of children in the cotton fields being forced to work, the government had started to shift to using older university students or older high school students, and then to teachers, nurses, doctors, bank tellers, security personnel, any kind of government staff. And so then due to a lot of the brands being unhappy with that situation and kind of a cry out that this is still a forced labor situation, again, change has been afoot. So there has been a lot of change since, over the last many decades. In particular, we started to see that change starting in 2013. So today, and even, ILO and Jonas's work doing the third-party monitoring, they've demonstrated and really trying to get a better handle on the prevalence, on the quantity. And that has been going down over the last years. But even per the ILO's numbers, I think last year it was somewhere around 70 or 80,000 people are estimated still to be working in forced labor, being forced to go and work, or hiring somebody to go for them because they themselves don't want to do it. So it has been going down, but it's not totally gone yet.
Jonas, do you want to take that question?
Yes, thank you, Andrew. And it's a great question. Does it exist? But first of all, I think it's important to recognize that forced labor exists in all countries and in all sectors. The context may differ, but we cannot afford to let our guards down regardless of where we operate or source from. But for Uzbekistan, as Patricia said, the context was a Soviet legacy agricultural system where the government, rather than the market, would dictate production inputs, volume, and outputs. This has changed now, and the sector is being privatized and liberalized. But large-scale and deep reforms like this take time. And it also takes time to change thinking and behavior. Now, I can answer your question very precisely, given that we conduct some 11,000 interviews with cotton pickers every year. And we use networks of independent human rights activists, 400 labor inspectors, and of course, our international ILO experts to monitor the harvest in Uzbekistan every year since 2013. Since the reforms began in 2017, we have recorded a consistent and very significant increase in wages for cotton pickers and a corresponding drop in forced labor. So to give a little bit more context, the cotton pickers work for an average of 21 days. And during that time, each picker typically earns the equivalent of a monthly salary for a teacher or a doctor. Now, in a country like Uzbekistan with significant unemployment, this is attractive. And today, the vast majority, or 96% of cotton pickers, are not forced. That said, and as Patricia very correctly pointed out, a small minority of pickers still experience some degree of coercion in the recruitment process. And I would like to stress that all pickers are paid, at least the minimum wage. Even those who meet the definition of forced labor are paid. The issue relates to the perceived or direct negative consequences during the recruitment phase. And forced labor is never acceptable and must never be tolerated, and it doesn't matter in which country it happens. But the good news for Uzbekistan is that our data clearly shows that the reforms are working and that the prevalence of forced labor is decreasing rapidly. And if we look at the 2020 cotton harvest, the reduction even accelerated compared to previous years.
And thank you for that. There's a new harvest now, right? When is this harvest going to be ready? And when will your figures be for 2021 available?
So the harvest runs September, October, and into November. We typically have preliminary data available mid-December, and we present our full report in February the following year.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's change subjects. We're going to come back to labor because we can't avoid the subject, but we're going to change subjects and go to production for a second. Can we get from Mozaffar? Can you please tell us exactly what your company does? And yeah, we're a gene show. You're a gene company. Tell us the whole story, what you do.
Yeah. Thanks, Andre, for the opportunity to speak, and thanks, Jonas, Patricia. I think you really described it in a proper way, and I just couldn't agree more. Something I will just add to that, if you allow me, Andrew, is that we need to understand that the government, the state, is recognizing that there was a forced and child labor before, and I think that in itself is a kind of a big step forward, because up to certain point, no one actually said that there was anything to do with forced and child labor in Uzbekistan from the government's perspective. But now They recognize it, they know it, and they're consistently trying to reduce and eradicate it. So the child labor has been completely eradicated as per ILO's report. Systematic forced labor has been eradicated as well. Definitely there seems to be some instances at a local level, but again, it's nothing systematic, and the intention of I think the country's leaders is to completely get rid of it as soon as possible. Coming back to our production, so we've been set up in 2016, and our company came from really different backgrounds. So we were mainly in raw materials. We've been doing a business in Uzbekistan, in some European countries, in Russia, and it was mostly to do with oil, with cement, and kind of that natural resources. And we've seen in 2016 an opportunity that the reforms they happening in the cotton sector and the privatization which could happen. We saw that as an opportunity to diversify our assets and our portfolio. But what would we give in? It would be time and patience and a lot of money and investments which we had to do. So we picked it up, and then we leased 8,000 hectares of fields in Bukhara region of Uzbekistan. And we started kind of implementing the best practices, employing the top people, and trying to add the value as much as possible through the supply chain before exporting the final product. So we came up with a proposal saying that, look, exporting a fiber, raw fiber, in itself, like for a price of $1.5 to $2, that wouldn't really make much economical sense in the long term, and Uzbekistan would stay as a country which just supplies other countries, and they get rich, and then we buy back the same products 10 times the value added on the top. So our idea was to process it in Uzbekistan as much as possible. First of all, that would increase the employment. Secondly, that would bring a lot of innovation and know-how. We would be building new industries from scratch. And thirdly, that would obviously increase the GDP and then the livelihoods of all the people working there. So we started with that. We set off in 2016, and then by 2019 we completed our last project, which was building the textile mill. And right now we grow the cotton. We have our own ginning. Then we have a spinning, then we have a weaving for the fabrics, and then we also have a sieving and stitching for the garments. On top of that, last year we went one step further, and we've created a brand. It's called B Jeans, and right now we have around 15 stores, and we have already stores outside Uzbekistan. So we are in Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan. And by the spring next year, we're planning to open in Russia and Georgia as well. So if before the fiber used to make one pair of jeans would be exported, let's say for again 1.5. Now the prices have gone up a bit, but on average around that price. Now we can make, let's say, roughly 2, but maybe 1.5 pairs of jeans from the same amount of fiber, and export that one for about $25 each, and that means like a 30x the added value. And where does the money go? Well, the money is going to roughly 4,500 people who work in our supply chain. So we have around 3,000 people working at the farms, and then we have 1,500 people working at our denim side. So 4,500 people, each of them has, let's say, a couple of children. In Uzbekistan, usually the average is like 3 to 5. So, and you can see how many people are benefiting. Plus, complete transparency, complete traceability, because it's all under one roof, it's in-house. and any auditors can come and then, you know, trace it all the way up to our plantations.
Okay. You have to
Higher quality.
You have to give us a break here. We have to go move.
Yeah, sorry about it.
Yeah,
because I live with this project, sometimes I can go to monologues and then forget the time.
I think all of
So
us
that's
are able to do that if we get to, we're allowed to talk about what we do, I think. But Dan, tell us about what you're doing, what's your mission, and where you stand today.
Andrew, we came to Uzbekistan originally, our family did back in 1977 with my wife's grandfather under the USSR. And there was a cotton germplasm exchange in the late 80s. My father-in-law had sold a company called Stoneville Pedigreed Seed Company in Stoneville, Mississippi, which I think you know very well.
I do.
Which now is a subsidiary of Bayer Corporation. And
BASF bought it 3 years ago.
Yep. Okay. So, you know, the engagement in Central Asia was initially by my father-in-law, and I joined him in 1994 with my first visit to Uzbekistan. We had discussed with the government about different types of modernization of everything from varieties to mechanization. And as Patricia pointed out, many things declined in that time frame afterwards, and the country did not progress and modernize. They actually regressed and demechanized. And so in 2018, we received a call from the ambassador, the Uzbek ambassador in the United States, Mr. Javanvahalov. He asked us if we would be interested, we being myself and my brother-in-law, father-in-law, who's now deceased, would be interested in coming back and helping the country modernize agriculture, and particularly to focus on the eradication of the forced and child labor through the mechanization of harvest process and the validation of digital agriculture. So coming from the West, coming from the United States, we brought John Deere into Uzbekistan with the CP690s. Our first year was in 2019 for our harvest. This year, as we are going through the process of harvesting, we have a model farm of 2,000 hectares, an additional 9,700 hectares that we lease from farmers in the Paktikor district. And so what we are focused on the model farm is creating best practices with Western processes and Western practices and modern digitalization. And what that means is, yes, we have the same kind of structure and vision that Muzaffar has, being able to control and create cotton and harvesting and conditions within our district, within this particular specific area. But we're also focused on digitalization of that harvest data so that we can actually have digital traceability for validation of how cotton was harvested on our farms. We have, of course, cotton production. We have a ginning process. We're in the process now of partnering and acquiring a spinning mill. We'll also be moving into partnering arrangements with weaving. That's how we got connected in some of our dialogue, Andrew, with the denim. There are only a few denim weavers in Uzbekistan. We're looking to expand our operations, of course, over the next several years with that continued vertical integration and export focused and particular to the U.S. Consumer markets.
Okay, thank you all. This is the end of our section that's going to be shown during this live broadcast of Kingpins 24, but we're going to continue. So for those that really want to have more information, please stay tuned or come to our on-demand. Thank you. Okay, we'll keep going now. We're just starting. Patricia, there's been a lot said. I'm sure you have something that you wanted to comment on, something that was floated out there when you were not talking.
Thanks, Andrew. I want to really congratulate Muzaffar and Dan for implementing new and modern practices, which is great. And I actually am very hopeful and optimistic about the future of Uzbekistan and the opportunity for workers to be empowered and for Uzbekistan to sell internationally. In fact, we're talking to several brands now about the opportunity to come to Uzbekistan and start sourcing from there. And the conversation is really about, how can these brands have assurances that the farms that they're sourcing their cotton from, that's going into their products, how can they know that there isn't forced labor on those particular farms? And how can they know that that's the cotton that's going into their products? I think one really interesting thing about Uzbekistan is that it doesn't import cotton at the moment. It's only using its own cotton, which means that you can have a more a very contained whole value chain and have traceability and track and trace through the whole thing. So, Mustafa's example, if they're only using their own cotton, or maybe they are buying Dan's cotton, right? But you could know specifically what cotton is going into your product. And therefore, if you have the assurances on the ground, and following international due diligence guidelines, having strong remediation and grievance mechanisms for workers, you could then be, quite confident that that product, and from the cotton, all the way through and having assurances throughout the manufacturing facilities that you have a very ethical, sustainable product, if you're implementing all of that, and that's actually the cotton in your product. Because internationally, there's so much movement and so much blending and mixing of cotton that many brands have no idea where the cotton actually originates in other countries. But in Uzbekistan, you could actually have that whole kind of contained value chain and really know what's in your product. So I think that's quite exciting. And I think there are a lot of brands who are interested in that.
Let's just hold that for a second. Jonas, can you talk about what the ILO's mission is as far as the situation in Uzbekistan and progressing, and how the country should be, and what's the idea of the ILO?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Andrew. So, how can I put it? If you are a company, an international company or a foreign company, considering to source from Uzbekistan, but you don't quite know how to go about it, think about the situation like this. Now, in the past, you were in front of an ocean or a lake of systemic forced labor, and you could not move forward without getting your feet wet. But since 2017, the water level has dropped and islands of dry land have started appearing. And today, I think the landscape has changed dramatically. And you're mainly looking at dry land. Roads, paths are maybe emerging. And while you still have isolated sort of puddles, potholes, pools of forced labor here and there, I would argue that the terrain is navigable if you have the right risk management tools. And to your question, the official ILO position, and this is not my opinion, this is the official position of the organization I work for. The official ILO position is clear. There is no more systemic forced labor in the cotton harvest in Uzbekistan, and we believe that responsible sourcing of Uzbek textiles and garments should be encouraged and facilitated to further accelerate the reforms and to create full-time, decent jobs in the country, like Mustafa described. And this ILO position is backed by a number of recent policy changes in the last 12 months. Uzbek textiles and garments were granted GSP Plus status with the EU. The US trade representative closed the labor review for Uzbekistan. The country was upgraded in the latest JTIP report from the US government and also received recognition just yesterday of progress by the US Department of Labor. So overall, of course, there's still work to do in Uzbekistan, but clear and steady progress. And we firmly believe that it is now possible to source responsibly from Uzbekistan.
And I just want to, build on that because yes, all these changes are happening, but there's no current system, to give the brands the assurances they need. So although all boats are going up, or maybe in your metaphor, the water's going down, but having a system where you have independent monitoring, telling people what's happening, because even per the ILO's own numbers, there is still forced labor there, right? And in the US, brands can't import any product, with forced labor in it. It could be stopped at the border. So in that sense, I agree that, there's great progress happening, but we need systems where there's assurances and independent monitoring on the ground, so that the brands know for sure in that particular cotton and product, there's no forced labor.
Okay, so let's go to the practical. Let's go
Andrew,
practical.
Andrew, may I just insert just a little bit here? So I think there's also maybe a paradigm shift in how those issues are being addressed by certain companies. I can't speak for Muzaffar's company, but I know they have a very good reputation in their approach to doing business. But I can't speak about what our approach has been, which we've taken the tact that instead of having human labor, we have mechanized significantly, and not just to have a 2-row or 4-row picker that comes in and it's a machine picked. It's also a 6-row cotton picker called the John Deere CP690. The technology that's actually on board that particular piece of machinery brings in satellite data and verification and validation of not only that machine serial numbers, modules, the whole process of latitude, longitude, drops, pictures, data, harvest information is submitted from the machine to our operations center. And now we actually have RFID tags that are in the bell wrap or the module wrap that's in the field. I can track and prove for our cotton that we've harvested from the field to my gin that we have machine harvested that cotton. That we then take further those serial numbers and traceability through the ginning process to the baled fiber. We're working right now in this particular season to take Silverleaf's cotton that's been ginned and RFID traced through that process now to the spinning mill. So when you start talking about looking at tags and clothes that say made in India, made in Pakistan, made in Vietnam, and you talk about the different blending of cotton, yes, because we're in Uzbekistan, we can at least say the cotton did come from Uzbekistan. There's no import. But where did that cotton come from? How do you trace that back to the field? We are offering some of the first true digital agricultural traceability solutions in the world. We're working with John Deere Corporate in America. We know that no one else is using this technology in the fashion that we are to be able to bring that validation of that process to cotton, to fiber that will then ultimately end up in that garment. And so you'll have true traceability, not from origin of where it was made and manufactured, but where the cotton was grown all the way down to the field level, down to the square meter.
Okay, Muzaffar, tell us about how you can guarantee the origin of in a pair of jeans that you would sell, how you can guarantee the origin of the cotton.
And not just the origin of the cotton, but the conditions on the field of where the cotton is picked. Thank you. If any of it's hand harvested, I'm not familiar if you hand harvest or if you also machine harvest.
Yeah. Actually, I'm gonna quickly add to Dan's point. I think they're doing really interesting innovations right now, and many other farmers and the clusters, they look up to Silverleaf, to get some insight, how to do things in a kind of more developed way. So thanks, Dan, for that. So we are using similar technologies. We don't work with John Deere, we work with Case. So we have a couple of farms. So the BCT denim division I was talking about, where I coordinate, that's 8,000 hectares of fields. And then we have another 35,000 hectares of fields near Tashkent region. There we're building a brand new 100,000 spinning mill right now. So there we have around 30 cotton pickers, which we bought from Case, and similarly, all of them are GPS tracked, and then all the agro operations are in PO cloud system. We use that in our BCT as well, exactly the same system, but the cotton is picked manually. So what we've seen is that during the harvesting period, when the machines are working, a lot of local people, they are unhappy. Why? Because they lose their employment. And we had instances where people just came up to us and they were like, we were looking forward to pick cotton at your farms and you have mechanized it. So what happens to our income and all that? So I think it's a thin balance. So we need to mechanize for sure, for the economies of scale. But at the same time, at least our approach is that we have to ensure there is good amount of employment as well, so that people get paid fair salaries, and then they can make their living. Because the important thing in our idea is that the impact the business, the responsible business, does to the community around it, because that's the community who is gonna work at your factories in the future. So that's why I think it's important to catch that balance. And what we're doing for that is that we are building the next stages. And what happens as we mechanize, as we bring, let's say, decrease the amount of human labor, those people, they get retrained, they get paid higher salaries, and they get shifted up the supply chain, so that we have a lot of people right now who used to be, let's say, farmers or their children or whoever, they're working at our spinning mill. And, they have better working conditions. I mean, it's all AC'd up, and then they get paid higher salaries and less manual work. And then, it can go all the way up to the final point. So these are some of the developments. And throughout our farms in Bukhara as well, we use a digital cloud solution from a company called Cropio. So what it does is that we digitalized all the fields within our farm. We have GPS tagged all the machinery. We have Bluetooth tagged all the supplementary equipment goes on the farmers who use let's say the tractors and the rest. They get a key like in the hotel, so they beep it, they switch on, they have a computer which shows them the agro operations which have to be performed. And we can track everything from speed, from how much fuel they use, at which fields they work. And we can also see the vegetation of the fields, because every couple of days a satellite brings us an NVDA images, and then we can see, we can compare the other historical data in order to see how the agro operations have affected the harvest and quality. Yes, Patricia.
Yeah, I was wondering, have you also brought technology to the hand harvesters? So maybe when somebody drops off their bundle of cotton, I know that there's new technologies about doing, I don't know, iris scan, fingerprint, so that it gets recorded, the weight of what they're dropping off, so they don't have to keep it in a book and put little, pencil marks. So, so are you bringing our technology there as well?
Definitely. We are thinking quite a lot about that and how we can kind of improve the traceability. Right now, I mean, we need to understand, like, this is really new movements going on in Uzbekistan. It takes time, and first and foremost, a lot of money, and it should be done step by step. So at least what I can say is that we have the digitalization movement started, and we are kind of trying to perfect it year by year. That's what we're going to do. And we were speaking with Andrew as well regarding the cotton, the fiber trace idea. I think it's amazing how we can actually have the, it's almost genetically printed codes on the fiber. Even if you burn it, you can still. So something we're working. So there are things in development. I cannot tell you straight away until we kind of mature them, but definitely they are. And then we have the ERP system at the mill side, and we have all the bales, which are, first of all the bales which are ginned, they get the their bar tag, and then once it comes to the mill, they get scanned, and then we can see it throughout the process until the final garment. So now we have both equipment from likes of Tonello. They are the leaders in the washing process. For instance, they even give us receipts telling, yes, yes, Jonas?
Oh, sorry, I was just I didn't mean to interrupt you, Mustafa. I was just enjoying
No,
listening
please.
so much to you. And Dan,
Sorry.
and it reminded me of one thing. So I used to spend a decade going in and out of textile and garment and toy factories in China, Vietnam, Indonesia, Bangladesh, you name it. I've been to, I think, thousands of factories, and they tend to, and so have you, I assume, they tend to all look the same, don't they?
Yes.
You arrive at the factory gate, and then there's the production unit, and then there's a dormitory
Yes.
where the workers live, and they're young, they come from the countryside, they've relocated into the capital or some industrial neighborhood. They live in these dormitories for 3-4 years, work 18 hours a day. I'm exaggerating a little bit to make the point. And then they go back home and get married or buy a house or something like that. It's more or less the same story anywhere in the world, except Uzbekistan. And this is really something which I think is quite an opportunity. And Mustafa, and then listening to you talking about technology, but also talking about the importance of creating jobs in the local community. So when you come to Uzbekistan, Andrew and Patricia, you've been, so you will know this. When you land at Tashkent airport, you don't see a belt of factories around Tashkent like you do in many other cities. You don't have this sort of industrial zones that you see in many other countries. The clusters, the factories, the production is happening out in the provinces and in the districts and in the local communities. And I think this is important because I have yet to see a dormitory in Uzbekistan for workers. The workers are local, and it means that they go to school with the children, their children go to school with the children of the members, their neighbors, they hang out in the communities. And I think that changes the dynamic of these workplaces for the better. And I also, I mean, Mustafa, I can hear what you're saying. You care about the communities and the impact you're having, because that's where your asset is. That's where you need to have these good relationships. It reminds me when I was working for the mining industry, you can't move the mine. You have to have good community relations. You have to create these jobs locally. And there's a similar dynamic going on in Uzbekistan. And I would encourage the country to continue to pursue that strategy. Keep the jobs local and keep the workers local. It will do good for you in terms of working conditions, and it will lower the risks for companies looking to source from Uzbekistan.
Yeah.
All right, so I have to wrap up at this point. So let's have last comments. We'll let you go last, Patricia, since you went first. So you can have the last word. Actually, I'm going to have the last word, but you can have the last word before me. That's almost.
That's good.
So we'll start with Dan. How do you want to wrap up?
Well, Andrew, what I would like listeners and people that have any interest in Uzbekistan to truly understand, there have been a lot of changes since 2013. Under the current administration, I can tell you from a foreigner operating.
Can we keep these wrap ups to like under 90 seconds? Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. But looking at what's happened in Uzbekistan and the current posture of the administration and reforms, I can tell you that it's not going to happen overnight, but they're very serious about these reforms that everyone has been talking about today. The investment environment, the labor environment, the operating environment, and the economic environment within Uzbekistan have made tremendous change and tremendous progress. Yes, there's still a lot to do. There's still a long way to go. But the opportunity with Uzbekistan opening up as a new alternative, as a supply chain to brands around the world, is a valid for them to evaluate. And with that, I would invite anyone to come to do their own due diligence, to begin the networking and understand the possibilities of where this is going. We plan to take Uzbek product to the U.S. market, both in home textile as well as fashion textile. So we're excited about the opportunities and looking forward to it. And thank you for this opportunity, Andrew.
Thank you, Dan. Muzaffar.
Yeah. So I couldn't agree more with Dan and with everyone in the panel. But I want to highlight what Jonas said. I think in order to accelerate the progress in Uzbekistan, and to there is always a carrot and a stick. So we had the stick a lot for a long time. It's time to give the carrot, you know, and to accelerate, to show as an by example. So I think the paradigm has changed, and more we encourage now rather than criticize. This is how we're gonna have this movement sustainable and, you know, improving. And, you know, in the next 5 years, maybe 10 years, really Uzbekistan has a chance to be one of the top textile responsible and ecologically sustainable textile manufacturers in the world. We didn't speak much about ecological sustainability today. We focused a lot on the labor, but I'll tell you, we're doing a lot in that thing. We have invested a lot of money recently to recycle 90% of the water, gray water in our mill. We are investing in alternative energies. We are trying to save chemicals by using modern technologies from some companies like Tonello who do the washing. So I think we need to kind of get over the chapter of labor and start focusing on the big issues like the ecology, you know, save the planet, and that kind of trends on the regeneration and the recyclability.
Thank you. Jonas.
30 seconds, Andrew. I would like to end by making a special offer to all companies listening today. So the ILO, together with the World Bank and GIZ, will soon be launching a special pilot program where we will be implementing enterprise-level tools to improve social dialogue and improve working conditions in the workplace. We already have about 10 quite large European brands lined up as observers to this pilot program. It's free. There's no commitments. Anybody can observe. And it is an opportunity to get to know some of the Uzbek suppliers better, get insights into their social and labor performance levels. And if you're interested in joining this pilot as a brand observer, please send me an email to astrup@ilo.org, and I will see what I can do to find a few additional spaces for your listeners, Andrew. Thank you.
Thank you. And Patricia.
Thank you. I do think that Uzbekistan has a very interesting opportunity at the moment. And I think that keeping people employed, as Muzaffar was saying, hand harvesting can be done ethically. So let's keep people employed hand harvesting if that's what they want to do. But having the strong grievance mechanisms, collective bargaining, let's make sure that along with all the technologies, dealing with the sustainable, which is also important, especially for water, for Uzbekistan, and chemicals, is also doing, having really engaged workforce, not just an odd model. Cotton Campaign is also looking to pilot partnering with some of the clusters as well as brands. So I also encourage brands to contact us at the cottoncampaign.org and also implement a system where, especially with the cotton workers, since that's historically been the issues, is creating this engaged and empowered workforce, and then knowing that your cotton in your product is being harvested both responsibly and ecologically.
Thank you. So I'll wrap up this way. Having been brought up from my sleep in the last 2 or 3 months, I'm getting this sense that Uzbekistan is putting itself into a position as a leader of all the nations that are going to supply apparel, because the systems that are going to be in place are so stringent and so hard for the factories now and for the farmers, that the way that they're going to solve this problem is to be way ahead of everybody else. And I think it's a very exciting time. I think it's a brilliant opportunity for brands to get involved. And thank you to everybody on this panel. And hopefully we have some more panels. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you,
Andrew.
Thank you.
Thank you.